true to life. It's early on a Monday morning. You are a mid-20s human being. You have a significant other named Alex who you are rather fond of that you have been seeing exclusively for the past few months. The rest of your social circle consists of a variety of friends and acquaintances, some of whom you met at your day job, which is a little boring but pays the rent. You'd like to be doing more with your life, as would your parents, but you're still in the process of figuring out what that life is. Oh shit. It's early on a Monday morning. You are mid-20s. I don't know, I think it's going to be pretty sad. You are also dealing with motivation issues that sometimes make dealing with these things difficult. You feel like this is probably your fault, and on a bad day you can feel inwardly angry and down on yourself for being lazy, but you're not quite sure how you can break out of it, or how other people deal with these feelings and seem so very functional. You spend a lot of nights fixating on things about this, but never seem to do anything about it other than lose sleep. Oh, I got the answer, you just fucking go take Cipralax. That's not a backstory. This is some spooky ass music though. It's an unseasonably warm Wednesday evening. You spent the past several hours at work. The past week or so you found your job motivation flagging more so than usual. You've been in a fog practically all day today, simply going through the motions without realizing even what you've been doing half the time, and yet time seemed to be moving at half speed, so you're so checked out that when your boss approaches you to tell you that instead you can go home early, it barely registers. As you walk home, the streets hiss from the recent rainfall, and you know that your significant other will be in classes until late, another couple of hours at least. You briefly consider using the serendipitous solitude to catch up on that project you've been working on haphazardly for the past few months. As soon as you think about the work that awaits you at home, you feel a panic creeping up from the back of your brain, unbidden. All you can think about is how incredibly far behind you are, and the amount of work seems nothing less than insurmountable. By the time you arrive home and change out of your uncomfortable work clothes, the stress is weighing down on you like a heavy wet wool blanket. Your computer seems to be staring you down from your desk. You want to sit down and work, but the mere thought of trying to work sends your stress levels flying. More than anything, you feel suddenly and absolutely exhausted. Feel a strong desire to simply hide in bed. Do you? Not even an option. Your depressed interaction is exhausting and you become more and more withdrawn. You are currently seeing a therapist. You are not currently taking medication for depression. Well, if this were me, I would tell myself I just need a quick half an hour to unwind. Just a half hour of TV, you tell yourself, absently grasping for the remote. You don't so much sit down on the couch as sink into it. You turn on the TV and start going through your usual channel routine. After a few cycles of this, you realize that you're really not doing much more than thumb calisthenics and absently killing time. You check the clock and see that over 20 minutes have already passed since you sat down. Well, I wouldn't do that, I'd be straight to the fucking cooking network. As your self-imposed time limit creeps ever nearer, you become more and more anxious. You stand up and walk to the fridge, telling yourself, I'll just make a quick sandwich and get to work after that. Can't be productive on an empty stomach, right? As you eat, you start pacing around your apartment, heading past your bedroom in the process. You stop in the doorway as if physically unable to cross the threshold. Familiar waves of exhaustion start racking you, and you feel simultaneously tired and panicked. You close your door and head back to the couch. It's still early yet, you tell yourself. As long as I get to work in an hour, I'll have plenty of time to be productive. As you flip channels and let the CSI and Jeopardy reruns wash over you as you sink deeper into the couch, feeling at once encroached upon and shielded by it, being quite literally swallowed up by it. As the second hour draws near, sure enough, you find yourself getting anxious and jittery. You repeat the fridge pace couch process a couple more times before you look at the clock and realize that several hours have passed, and not surprisingly, you managed to get no work done. You crawl into bed acutely aware of the fact that you have to have work in the morning, and that an opportunity you had to catch up on your own creative endeavors today was squandered. You're feeling so disgusted with yourself that when Alex calls you to talk to you on her way home from class, you simply say you had a really rough day at work and you're trying to rest up before your shift tomorrow. She says she understands and wishes you a good night, but you can't help but notice she sounds slightly disappointed. Ironically, the stress of potentially upsetting your partner compounds the stress of not having gotten anything done this evening and the stress of having to go to work tomorrow. The buzzing of anxiety in your brain melts together with your body's utter physical exhaustion, and you sink to a semi-hypnagogic, anxious funk, too tired to try and work, but too anxious to fall asleep for several hours. It's a mild Friday afternoon. Alex calls you from one of her classes telling you that there's going to be a really awesome birthday party tonight at her apartment that one of her roommates is throwing. You've hung out with this roommate a few times with Alex and you get along well enough but aren't particularly close. You don't have work in the morning and have nothing else in particular to do tonight. You are feeling kind of run down, but you have been fatigued most of the time lately. You mention that you're feeling ill because you're not sure how else to explain those feelings to someone else, and say that you aren't sure if you can make it tonight. There's a second of silence over your phone, but you can swear you can hear the sound of your partner's face fall. She tries to convince you anyway. You haven't seen her this week, and she sounds pretty insistent that you come over. She even drops a few suggestively worded hints that you can stay over with them tonight after the party. It's important to Alex and you'd really like to see her. Seeing her does make you feel better sometimes, and you hope that this is the case tonight, even if it does mean dealing with all the usual social anxiety. The time to leave rolls around and you grab your overnight bag. Overnight bag, seriously. Alex's apartment is a short walk away, and there are already people hanging out on the porch. You feel your chest tighten as you approach the building and try to steel your nerves. You quickly find your partner chatting away with the birthday girl, and Alex immediately lightens up when she sees you. I'm so happy you came. I wasn't sure if you were going to make it. The young man taps her on the shoulder and she turns back to you to apologize and let you know that they have to do something for the party. Alex hands you a beer and plants a kiss on your cheek before going out to deal with whatever came up. As you look around, you don't see anyone else you recognize. To return. Leaves, you are not quite sure what to do with yourself. Standing in the middle of the room leaves you feeling kind of exposed, and you don't feel ballsy enough to randomly approach any of the groups of people clustered together talking. You head to a clear spot in the back wall and lean against it. For some reason, this always makes you feel more secure. You scan the party for a familiar face or any sign of your partner and come up with nothing. Not sure what else to do and worrying that you must look creepy just standing there watching everyone. You take out your phone to busy yourself. 20 semi-tedious games of Bejeweled Blitz later, your partner returns. You spend the rest of the night with Alex, occasionally being introduced to people and nodding along with the group conversations, even if you don't participate that much. At the end of the night, you're falling asleep with your girlfriend in the crook of your arm. She thanks you again for coming, half drunk. She confides that she thought you were going to flake out and was pleasantly surprised that you managed to come out. She says it lovingly, but you're not quite sure how you feel about that statement. afternoon, on a muggy Saturday, your mother has come over for a surprise visit, claiming loudly that she doesn't see you enough and she decided to invite herself over. As you converse, she walks around your place and you get the distinct impression that you're being inspected. "So what's going on with you lately?" she asks abruptly. Taken somewhat aback by this left fielder, you tell her that you're not sure what she means. She repeats the question, saying that you haven't seemed like yourself lately. She gestures to the dirty dishes piled in the sink and notes the fact that you haven't called her visit in a while. Your reticence only seems to spur her on more. She presses you, asking if you're having problems at work or with Alex, and you're beginning to feel increasingly battered by her sudden, well-meaning but overwhelming inquisition. Under her questions, you become increasingly uncomfortable. You want to be able to explain to her how you've been feeling, but the truth is you're not really sure yourself. Nothing horrific has happened at work or with your significant other or friends or anything like that, but all the same, you can't deny that lately you've just felt drained and as though you're not really here. You wish you could tell your mother these things, but she hasn't been approachable about negative emotions in the past. She's the kind of person who holds the opinion that the solution to any problem is simply try harder and maintain a positive attitude, a stance that has reared its head in past conversations when you've begun to explore the subject with her. You know she's unlikely to be understanding, and you feel energy drain out of you, imagining what would happen if you managed to blurt out everything you were feeling. What do you do? Tell her that everything's fine. "I'm okay, Mom, really. Thanks for worrying about me." Your mother looks at you from across the room with furrowed brows, and you wonder if the tone in your voice was the least bit convincing. She slightly opens her mouth as though she was about to say something more, but instead she digs through her purse for her cell phone, having apparently decided against it. "Well, as long as you're okay, honey," her voice trails. As your mother returns to what amounts to more or less small talk, you realize that this part of the conversation has happened a lot recently. Someone will express concern for you, or ask if you're okay out of seemingly nowhere. You tend to find that it's simpler to just declare that you're okay than find the right words for complicated and murky feelings. Besides, since none of them are in a reaction to a specific event, maybe you really are okay and you're just complaining about nothing anyway. Sometimes when you insist you're okay, to those who ask, you have to wonder if you're trying to convince them or yourself. Spooky. It's a late Sunday morning. You're idly clicking around online and your phone rings. Sam, a coworker of yours that you're friendly with, asks how you are and makes hurried small talk with you. You typically only ever talk to him on the phone when one of you needs a shift covered, so it's slightly awkward. You're waiting in anticipation for him to ask you to come in on short notice when he veers the conversation in a completely different direction. "How do you feel about cats?" he asks. "Mine had kittens a few weeks ago, and I'm having an awfully hard time finding a home for the last one in the litter. You don't have any pets, right?" It takes a moment to process this new information, and you're caught off guard as he begins to earnestly try and sell you on the idea of taking the last kitten off his hands. It's not something you had specifically considered before, and he seems fairly insistent. "She's a real sweetheart, really loves people. She's got all her shots already taken care of, and the vet said she's healthy as a horse. I can bring her over by your place tonight if you're interested." You look around your apartment and try to picture the cat in it as he continues to tell you how cute she is. You tell him that this is all kind of sudden and you don't have anything for the kitten set up here. "Oh, don't worry about that. I can bring over a litter box and food and all that since you'd be really helping me out of a fix. It's the least I could do. I don't want to have to put her in a shelter." You can't help but feel like you're being guilt-tripped, but you decide to give it some serious consideration. It does get awfully lonely around your apartment, and it might feel less empty with a cat around. However, since you've been feeling so down, it might not be a good idea to take on the responsibility of a cat, even if they are fairly low maintenance. But I'm not much of a cat person. Oh. Well, I don't like cats. You've never been a fan of cats. You feel like they all hate you, and you figure you have enough hate coming from your own inner monologues already. "I'm sorry, I just can't right now. I hope you find a good home for her." You sit through a few more sales pitch statements that border on guilt trips and rebut them with fabricated excuses about your landlord not allowing pets before your coworker gives up and thanks you anyway. You wish him luck in finding a home for her, and as you hang up you feel pangs of guilt as you imagine him having to put her in a shelter. The next day at work you run into your coworker and breathes a sigh of relief as he informs you that he was able to find a good home for the kitten. It's late Friday afternoon, and quitting time is just around the corner. A bright, clear day is giving way to a still, tempered evening. You can hear your coworkers all around you anxiously making plans for their evenings and weekends, but you're really looking forward to just going home and resting after what's turned out to be a very long and taxing work week. Just before the end of your shift, you get a call from Alex. It seems a group of your mutual friends are heading to a nearby pub for dinner and drinks to celebrate the end of the week. Then they want to know if you'd like to come along. You tentatively tell her that you're emotionally exhausted from the work week and a social outing like that would just take too much out of you today. You encourage her to go and have a good time since you know it's been a while since she's gone out with friends, but the effort feels futile since you know that she isn't going to go without you. A couple of hours later, the two of you find yourselves in a familiar position, on the couch watching comedy shows on Netflix, a box of pizza open on the coffee table in front of you. As you look across the couch at her, you start to feel anxious. You feel bad about effectively forcing the two of you to stay in tonight again. While you are always appreciative of your partner's efforts to take your feelings into account and help make sure you're socially comfortable, you sincerely worry that you're holding her back from enjoying a more fulfilling relationship. While she does seem to enjoy spending time with you, as the two of you sit in comfortable, almost contented silence watching old shows you've seen 2 or 3 times before, your ever-increasing fear that your relationship is becoming one-sided weighs more and more heavily on you. You feel more than ever like a burden or a ward to her, and it's virtually impossible for you to see what value you could possibly offer to her in return. Worst of all, this nagging fear has made you feel more self-conscious than ever, withdrawing ever inwards, and you started to pull away even from Alex herself. What do you do? As you look over at Alex, who hasn't noticed you watching her yet, you try to parse the expression on her face. You worry that it's one of sheer boredom and bare tolerance. You wonder if she's thinking about all the fun things she could have been doing tonight if she wasn't trapped on this couch with you, ordering from one of the same 3 takeout places that you always order from. A sense of disappointing her creeps over you as you picture what the night could have been if you had just accepted the invitation she had made earlier. I know this is a pretty boring Friday night for you. Are you really happy being with me, being like this? She turns and looks at you, forehead wrinkled. Why do you ask me that so often? You feel her body stiffen and pull away from yours just a little. Well, I mean, you start, but are unable to try and think of an answer. This is far from the first time you've had this conversation with her, and it's one that plays out the same way every time. You explain your fears of being worthless, and she tries to tell you that she doesn't see you that way. You insist that she is biased and just being nice to you because she's your girlfriend, and she gets frustrated. It never resolves. Nothing new is ever said, and rarely do you feel reassured by it. Forget about it, you mumble. You don't have the energy for that particular argument tonight. She seems to feel similarly as she runs her fingers through your hair and settles in next to you. The weight of an unspoken, unresolved issue in your relationship joins you in the room for a little while, but you dare not pick at it for the rest of the night. It's a breezy Sunday afternoon. You've followed Amanda, an old friend from school that is in town for the... You've allowed Amanda, an old friend from school that is in town for the weekend, to talk you into leaving the house for a coffee and catch up. You meet her in a small cafe and talk about what you've been up to since you've last seen each other, and you can't help but feel like they're a lot more accomplished and interesting than you are while you're listening to them talk about their real life after school. When it's your turn to brief them on your activities, you feel anxious and ashamed and give a very abbreviated version. You try to talk about your job as little as possible, and you feel incredibly boring while you describe it, despite her expressing sincere interest in you and your life. Amanda has known you long enough to read your mood and tone of voice. She leans in to ask a question while gently touching your hand, and a look of genuine concern on her face. What's wrong? Do you... Though you find it hard to lay out how you're feeling lately to other people, you decide to test the waters on opening up to Amanda. She's always been easy to talk to, and you feel like it's possible that she might be understanding of what's going on with you, even though you think it doesn't make sense sometimes. You begin to dance around the subject, dipping your toe in the pool to test the waters. Surprisingly, she catches on quickly and is even able to guess what you may say next. She asks the right questions, leading you to elaborate on your emotional state. You apologize profusely the entire time, feeling like you're being obnoxious, but she reassures you that you aren't burdening her. Amanda reveals to you that her mother suffers from clinical depression and that she has spent many nights talking her mother through very similar feelings. She mentions that therapy and medication have helped her tremendously and suggests you give it a try. You fight it until somewhat like a charity case, but she tells you that she'll get the number of her mother's therapist and email it to you as soon as she can. Afterward, the conversation drifts back to small talk and shared hobbies, and you spend a pleasant afternoon together. For the rest of the day, you find yourself wondering if therapy and medication can really help you. If you have an illness, or are simply complaining too much, and remember horror stories you've heard about antidepressants, you're not sure what you'll do if she remembers to email you the number for the therapist, and you secretly hope that she'll forget about it so you can avoid dealing with it at all. Holy fuck, how long is this? My throat hurts. It's a glaringly sunny Monday, and one of the few days that your brother Malcolm is in town free long enough for you two to actually see each other. You have a dental appointment that day, but you make plans for him to pick you up afterward. Your appointment takes a little longer than expected because your dentist tells you that you've started grinding your teeth in your sleep to a worrying degree. I've been there. Given how nearly everything in your life has been feeling enormous and stressful lately, this doesn't come as a surprise to you. He suggests that you try to reduce your stress levels and fits you for a night guard. It feels awkward and too big for your mouth, and you feel embarrassed looking up at your puffed face in the mirror. You finish up the appointment in a hurry and leave about half an hour overdue for meeting your always punctual brother in the parking lot. You finish up as quickly as possible and leave the building to scan the parking lot for your brother's car, but you don't see his old Civic anywhere. You pass by the blue Camaro and jump as it beeps at you, causing you to jump in surprise. It takes you a moment for you to realize, but it's Malcolm in the driver's seat. You hop into the passenger seat and compliment him on his new ride as he mentions that it's a perk of a promotion he's recently obtained at work. He starts telling you about how much more money he's making, how his career is really taking off, and how he's starting to look at houses with his wife soon. You clutch the bag containing the night guard in your hand and feel yourself clench your teeth as you think of your crummy apartment and how long it's been since you've been able to take a day off work without having to worry about making ends meet. He's only 2 years older than you, but it feels like he's eons ahead of you in every other aspect of your lives. So, yes, how did your appointment go? Did you get drilled full of holes or what? A sense of shame creeps over you. Actually, I guess I've been grinding my teeth in my sleep too much. Oh yeah, Malcolm asks. Isn't that a stress thing? Yeah, I guess I've been having kind of a hard time lately. I'm sorry to hear that, kiddo. Malcolm glances over at you. You stare out the window, feeling suddenly self-conscious as you watch houses and cars zip by. He asks, anything you want to talk about? I don't know. It's hard to talk about. Trying to figure out where to start feels like trying to pin down something flying around in your head, except it's one of millions of tiny bits of static flying around in there. It's more than talking about specific events because there are times you feel miserable without any specific catalyst to point to. It's a constant din of noise in the back of your head that never goes away. It only ever gets turned down. You try to explain all this to Malcolm, and he asks a lot of questions without judgment in an effort to help you give words to this jumbled mass of negative emotion. The two of you end up getting takeout and going back to your place and talk late into the night. After a long back and forth, he asks, is there anything I can do to help you with this? Don't tell Mom, okay? Yeah, she wouldn't get it, he replies with a slight laugh. Does talking about it help? Sometimes, kind of. Well, okay. Know that you can call me anytime you need to. He rests one of his enormous hands on your shoulder. You'll get through this, kiddo. It's a dry Sunday morning. You grab your morning coffee and sit down at your desk to check your email. A new message pops up on your inbox almost as soon as you do. It's from Amanda, and you remember your meeting in the cafe and awkwardly bringing up your feelings to her. Hey, buddy. Hey, sorry it's been a few weeks. I meant to get this to you sooner, but it took a while for me to get a hold of my folks back home. Dad told me to say hi, by the way. Anyways, I remember what we talked about last time I saw you, and I hope you weren't insulted, but I asked my mom for the number for her therapist. Don't worry, I didn't tell her who it was for. I think she's worried about me now, though. Haha. Anyway, the number is... Oh, that's Mississauga. It's a really good office. You should look into it. Talking to someone never hurts. If you're worried about money, don't be. They're one of the few that has a really good sliding scale fee that won't charge you what you can't afford. I hope you're feeling better. It was really nice to see you again. Hey. It's still early enough that you could call and make an appointment today. What do you do? The thought of picking up the phone and calling someone about this right now is overwhelming. Sure, you're having a hard time lately and have motivation issues, but are you really in need of therapy? Shouldn't you be able to just get over it yourself? What if they put you on medication that makes you feel like a zombie? What if you go and the therapist looks down on you? What will Alex think about this? Trying to think about all these things at once makes it feel like a very big deal, and you decide to take your time to think about it. The rest of the day passes quickly, and that night you have a hard time trying to sleep because your brain is too busy thinking about all these things, and it's hard to get any rest that night. The next morning you check your email again with blurry eyes. Amanda's email is still there, seemingly waiting for you. You are no more decided than you were yesterday. What now? Call. You read through Amanda's email 2 or 3 times and sit and stare at your computer for a while. While the memory of that uncomfortable conversation makes you feel newly embarrassed and self-conscious, part of you is also encouraged by the fact that she cared enough to get back to you at all. Sitting in front of your computer, you start to question things like whether or not Amanda sent you this number out of pity or perhaps some sense of obligation after having listened to you. You question her motives and the validity of her concern, and whether or not you think seeing a therapist would even be helpful. Yet, almost unconsciously, you reach for your phone before you realize what's happening. You're listening to the therapist's line ring. Before you can bring yourself to hang up, you're listening to the slightly clinical but not unpleasant voice of the receptionist ask how she can help you. I'd like to make an appointment with the doctor. You managed to stammer out. The conversation is quick and not nearly as unpleasant as you were fearing, and quicker than you can say Freudian slip, you've scheduled an appointment. Ugh, terrible. Quicker than you realize appointment day rolls around. What do you do? Let's take the happy ending. You have your first session with your new therapist, Dr. Susan Melville, a tall woman in her mid-40s with a disarming demeanor and patient eyes. With the start of this... God, the sound effects throw me off when they change. The slightest smile lines. She makes you feel comfortable fairly easily, which is a pleasant surprise after all of your anxiety over the appointment. As you leave, you make a second appointment. You're still skeptical about all of this, but you figure you may as well see where this goes. The hardest part, it seems, was taking the first step. You're still not sure if and how you're going to tell your family or your partner, but you figure you'll deal with that when the time comes. Either way, you feel relieved that you managed to see this through instead of being paralyzed with worry over it. Even if nothing comes of it, you did something you said you would instead of flaking out or running away. You're emotionally exhausted when you get home and collapse into bed. You sleep better that night than you have in a week. You're not sure if it's because you were so tired when you got home or because of the therapist. It's early on a Wednesday morning. Lately you've developed the nasty habit of waking up 10 to 20 before your alarm rings, and unfortunately today is no exception. Yeah, I have that problem too. You lay in bed, each minute ticking closer and closer to wake-up time, passing on a swelling wave of over-encroaching dread. Sooner than you would like, your alarm blares with caustic inevitability. You frantically pound on the snooze button, then retreat under your blankets as if the warmth of your comforter can shield you from the passage of time. You almost always have difficulty rising from bed, but today that simple task seems nothing short of Herculean. After several snooze cycles, you decide that you just can't deal with workday. You're incapable of even rousing yourself from bed, let alone going into work and having to force yourself through a workday. Not to mention, you've snoozed so many times that it would be impossible to make it on time now anyway. In spite of the fact that your body is actively fighting you literally every step of the way, you somehow manage to drag yourself out of bed and make your way to work. Surprisingly, you end up only being about 5 minutes late and nobody seems to notice or care. Though when you woke up, the simple act of even being physically present at your job seemed like an impossibility, you were surprised at your own ability to push through the day. While you are far from enjoying, or indeed even really coping with the dullness of your job today, you seem to have slipped into a trance-like state of automation, and time is nevertheless passing. Eventually, the end of the day rolls around, and you head home, utterly exhausted, but at the same time almost proud of yourself for having stuck it out. It's 2 a.m. on a Sunday, and you have to work in the morning. You roll over to see the sickly green glow of the time display on your LED alarm clock and let out an exasperated sigh. You've been trying to fall asleep for over 3 hours now to no avail. Every time your head hits the pillow, you're overcome with anxious thoughts that wrap themselves around each other. Worries about your job lead to worries about your future, lead to worries about your very identity, and you're unable to shake them off long enough to doze off. Your eyes won't even stay shut as your mind races through imagined scenarios going horribly wrong, which you promptly attribute to your general worthlessness. Your thoughts run too fast for you to come to a satisfying conclusion on any of them. Your room is completely silent, but the silence has given way to loud static noises rattling around inside your head. Your heart beats loudly and you worry it's beating a little too fast. You worry that if you focus too strongly on your racing heart, you'll freak yourself out hard enough to have a heart attack. You have to be awake for work in a mere 8 hours, and you know that your work is so much worse on only a few hours sleep. What do? Let's go to your computer. You get out of bed and head to your desk. Laying in bed with nothing but your thoughts to keep you company makes you feel like you're going insane. The harshness of the light coming from the screen makes you squint as you turn it on. Despite how often you find yourself in this exact situation, there have been so many nights lately just like this. As you begin reading a news story, an online friend of yours IMs you. You're up late again, I see. Yeah, can't sleep again. Thinking too much again? You guessed it. Want to talk about it? You end up talking with Attic for quite some time about how you've been feeling. He's always been easy to talk to about personal matters, and the added security of talking online helps. Being able to rethink what you say as you type it out and check it before you send really helps you gather your thoughts, and you find it less intimidating in a way to type it all into a prompt and say it out loud. I don't want to be that guy who thinks they can diagnose something because I read a Wikipedia article, but it kind of sounds like you might have depression. You should talk to someone about that, like a doctor. You pause. Are you really that transparent, or is it that you've gotten used to talking about your feelings at this point? Your insomnia makes you a little paranoid, but you shake it off. We can do some research and see if there's a good doctor near you. It's not like you're going back to sleep anytime soon anyways. Might as well do something while you're awake. Why would you lie about it? Oh, okay. I'm glad you're taking that step. I've heard it's not an easy one. I know people kind of suck at understanding this sort of stuff sometimes, but there's nothing wrong with having depression. You wouldn't be ashamed to have bronchitis or something, so there's no reason to be ashamed if it's your brain that's sick instead. You spend a few more minutes talking with Attic about your therapy and your feelings about it. He's incredibly supportive, and you're happy to find that you have a confidant that understands your illness and is willing to lend an ear when you're having nights like this. A little while later, you fall back into bed and find it easier to drift off to sleep. Even in therapy, you know you're still going to have nights like these sometimes. It's good to know you have a friend that will help carry you through them. You are definitely still depressed, but things are getting better. Whatever you're doing seems to be working. You really feel like you're taking steps to affect positive change in your life. You now seem to enjoy seeing your therapist. Between giving you a chance to talk things out and the cognitive behavioral therapy technique she shares with you, you find your sessions extremely helpful. It's a chilly Thursday night and you've just gotten off work. This has felt like one of the longest days you've faced in recent memory. Even though nothing exceptional has happened, a ton of minor things kept going wrong, and coworkers had tried your patience throughout the day. You considered leaving work early, but the last thing you wanted to do was deal with your insufferable boss on top of everything else. You're lost in thought on the commute home, and your feelings of frustration both with your life and the world around you build as you run into minor annoyances like someone bumping into you really hard as they walk by. By the time you get home, you're exhausted and remember that these feelings were ones you identified as negative feedback loop with your therapist. These pent-up feelings aren't dying down and are eating at you. You open your front door and stare at your apartment. An overwhelming feeling of exhaustion overcomes you, and you feel like your energy levels are low enough that you'll likely settle down into a single activity tonight. Your head feels too noisy and you need to trade it for some actual conversation. Your therapist did say that it was important to reach out to your support network, so you might as well give it a shot. Who do you call? Definitely my girlfriend. You dial Alex, who picks up after only 2 rings and asks if she has time to talk, and she tells you she's just hanging around her PJs and is actually somewhat bored for once due to being caught up on her coursework. You try to figure out where to start with how you're feeling and are overcome with missing her face. You ask if she feels like grabbing some dinner, and you notice her barely contains surprise and delight on the other end of the line. You meet eat about half an hour later at an inexpensive diner not far from your apartment. While the food is not great, you're surprised by how much your mood seems to have elevated just by being in her company. While at first you were extremely hesitant to talk about your job situation for fear of being burdensome or sounding like a whiner, you see her listening intently to you with what even seems to be genuine concern. After winding down with the beer, you cautiously open up a little more about your feelings surrounding your job and how drained it leaves you feeling. How you feel like you're simply existing, selling days of your life for no real purpose. You surprise even yourself when you start talking about how frustrated and stymied you feel by your job, about how you used to feel passionately about things, but feel like all your energy and capacity for creativity is getting leached out of you each and every workday. You can't remember how long it's been since you've externalized this much raw emotion. The two of you spend several hours in that diner booth, long after your half-eaten food was cleared by the waitress stopped refilling your coffee cups. As you get up to leave, a sudden wave of self-consciousness washes over you, and you feel suddenly incredibly awkward. Then Alex stands up and grabs you tightly around your waist. You realize that, short of boring her with your seemingly endless rants, she's simply happy to have gotten the chance to spend time with you, real time with you. It's been by all accounts incredibly too long since you've allowed yourself to open up to them like this, and there's an almost palpable feeling of closeness you allow yourself to hold on to as you go to bed that night. It's an utterly nondescript Wednesday afternoon, the type of afternoon that would completely fade from memory unless one made an active effort to preserve it. As has become routine on Wednesdays, you are sitting on the couch in Dr. Melvin's office. To your mild surprise, she begins the session by breaking her characteristic therapist silence and begins speaking up right away. I wanted to start by saying I think it's great you decided to come see me. It's an incredibly important first step. I wanted to take some time today to talk to you about the possibility of supplementing or substituting your treatment with medication. The mention of medication makes your ears perk up and you feel your heart rate increasing. She continues, many people find adding a pharmacological element to their treatment to be very helpful, and some even prefer taking drugs, completely eliminating their need to visit a therapist at all, providing you rely on your support network and are still reaching out to people. I would prefer it if we kept talking, should you choose to start medication, so that I can monitor your progress and adjust as needed, but the choice is ultimately yours. I just wanted to run the option by you to gauge what your thoughts on the matter might be. Dr. Melville has just given you a lot to think about. What do you do? Smart thing. You think the matter over long and hard. It's strange to think that recently none of this sort of thing was even on your radar, and here you are being asked to make a decision about it. You're both skeptical and nervous, still getting over the initial shock of even just talking to a therapist. Still, over the years, you've done enough entry-level reading on the subject to know that if it doesn't help, at least it probably won't hurt, right? After an intense and protracted period of internal vacillation, you decide to bite the bullet and go for it. You tell Dr. Melville that you'd like to try medication in addition to your therapy, and you spend about half an hour going over what you'll be taking and what you should expect from it. Thinking back on the decision later, you're pretty sure that you had your fist tightly clenched the whole way through. It's a Wednesday evening and you're visiting at your parents' house for holiday. Oh, got a burp that won't come out. It's one of the handful of times during the year that you drive out to visit your old hometown, and you've seen random people you had gone to school with around town. Whenever bumping into them, the usual short versions of what you've done since graduating are now exchanged. You've gone through a few of these today and have been very aware of how much you feel you haven't accomplished. When you were in high school, you had much larger plans, and you feel like you've failed to manifest most of those. Even if you had managed to, you've largely lost interest in what you thought you wanted to do growing up. Now you're not really sure of what you want to do, and you feel like you're lacking the ambition or drive to figure it out. Everyone you've caught up with seems so much happier than you, like they've got their lives all figured out, and you've kind of been feeling like a failure by comparison. Your brother Malcolm arrives with his wife in tow shortly before you all sit down to dinner. He's been traveling for his job lately, and you haven't seen him since the day he picked you up from the dentist. Your parents haven't seen him since before then. During dinner, they all catch up and Malcolm talks about the amazing things he's done on the road. Your mother turns to you and asks what you've been up to since you've seen them last. Oh, same old, you say. Nothing really new going on. Your mother makes a face. Oh, nothing new? How long are you planning on staying at that job of yours? What do you say? Actually, you start sheepishly. I'm not sure what I want to do right now. Your mom puts her fork down. So what, you're planning on living the way you do for the rest of your life? How would you afford a house on that paycheck? What about the kids? Your father interrupts, lightly placing his hand on your mother's. It's okay, Linda. Let the kids be what they are. There's nothing wrong with not knowing what you want to do in your 20s. I didn't get into construction until I was nearly 40. Your mother looks across the table at you, unsatisfied with her husband's reasoning. I don't think it's normal for someone at that age to not have a plan. You need to think hard about it, or you'll never make anything of yourself. You? Mom, come on. This emotionally exhausts you. You want to tell her that you are thinking hard and that not knowing what you're doing with yourself bothers you more than it could ever bother her. That sometimes it feels like you're lost in the woods, and that if you were to drop dead in your apartment, the world wouldn't notice. You want to make her understand that more often than not, you feel like an alien, like there isn't anywhere in this world that feels like a place where you belong, and you have no idea how to fix it or what to do. You wish you could find the words so that she would understand that being looked down on for this kills you, and drives home the feeling of being a total outsider. Instead, you get very quiet for the rest of the meal while your mind goes numb. Everything inside you feels exhausted. It's a rainy night. You are hurrying through the rain to Alex's apartment at her behest. Though your pace is quick, the rain is steadily soaking up your pant leg as you traverse the town, and it's darkening your already poor mood. The call came while you were at home after a day of dealing with abnormally frustrating people. You'd spent the afternoon trying to unwind and get some work on your project done. Alex called and interrupted one of your try to make progress, get frustrated, not making progress, have a harder time making progress due to frustration and repeat loops, and you haven't fully shaken off the feeling of being annoyed with yourself from it yet. You knock on her door, and on the third knock, you hear her voice call from further in the apartment to come in. As you cross the threshold, dripping wet in rain, you notice that the lights are all turned down very low in the apartment. You squint to navigate it as you clutch onto your damp umbrella, but end up hitting your shit on the side table, mumbling a profanity under your breath. You barely make out Alex emerging from the hallway, clad in what looks to be a robe with bare skin on her legs peering out underneath. Why don't you come in and warm up, she asks, in her designated, slightly cheesy, sexy voice. After a beat of silence, she states more naturally, my roommates are out of town this weekend, so I thought it might be nice to have a little fun while they're away. You appreciate her affection, but you're too wrapped up in your own negative feedback loops to be in the mood right now. What do? You look at her standing, barely lit, and notice there's a few candles scattered around the apartment. It occurs to you that she has tried to make this night special for the two of you. Even though you have a tight knot of antisocial frustration in your stomach, seeing how much she cares about you want to try to melt it away so you can show her how much you care that she's gone through all this trouble. However, you desperately need to shift gears first before that's even possible. You look amazing. Let's have a drink together, you suggest, hoping that this will give you the push you need to get in the mood. You go into the kitchen and pour the two of you drinks, trying to focus on letting go of the bad mood. You sit down on the couch next to her and she cuddles up to you instantly. What should we toast to? She asks as she takes her drink. You think for a moment, passing up the cheesy to us option. You say what's on your mind, letting go of your bad day. To tonight. The two of you cheers, and you ask her about her day. Conversation turns flirtatious, and the two of you find yourselves in the bedroom shortly after. You find that you're having trouble getting into things physically with her, and remember that diminished arousal was a possible side effect of your medication. You'd hoped that you were part of the population that wouldn't be affected by it, but it seems as though this was not the case. However, you're able to still enjoy the closeness with Alex and fall asleep together happily. It's an early winter evening, and even though it's not particularly late, the time of year has lent the sky an almost prematurely darkened cast. Day after day, just like today, you trudge home from a job you have increasingly come to hate. On this day, your job misery seems to have reached critical mass, and not even shedding your rain-laden and uncomfortable work clothes helps you unwind from your workday. You collapse into your couch, blanket numb. While your job always seemed to be just an unpleasant reality of existence, it was a position you sort of fell into unexpectedly, never intending to work there long term, and it's getting harder and harder to keep it up. While it's certainly not your dream job, you've always sort of just stuck it out of necessity, but it's becoming increasingly difficult to do that. Though you couldn't even begin to imagine what else you could do, you find yourself face to face with a question you just can't ignore. Is your complacency worth the price of this level of misery? What do you do? You sit down at your computer to blow off some steam, but are surprised to find your thoughts drifting to your long-neglected project. You talk yourself into opening it up and taking a look at the first time of what must be weeks. For whatever reason, your anger that you've been feeling towards your day job seems to have converted into pure passion as you seem to be overflowing with ideas tonight. It's as if you've got a buildup of ideas that just haven't gotten out and now you're in the zone. But you don't get an unnatural amount of work done. You do work for a solid couple of hours and it really feels great. What's more, you share some stuff across your social media networks and you receive quite a bit of positive feedback, which makes you feel great. When you go to bed that night, you tell yourself that your job may suck, but at least you've got something you really care about that you can put effort into and feel really good about yourself. In fact, as you're falling asleep, you can barely even remember your workday. It's a little past 8 p.m. on a Tuesday night. You're at your computer, frustration levels peaked, rubbing your eyes and sighing heavily. You're working on a project from your job that has you stretched to wit's end and trying to meet a looming deadline. What kind of job where you do shift work that you can cover gives you at-home work with looming deadlines? And as it lurks closer and closer, you are seriously doubting your ability to get it done. You're dragging your feet a little at work due to your complete lack of energy lately, in spite of wanting to do a good job. You find yourself unable to push past it and feel horribly useless for it. You slide your hands off your face and look at the screen as it beeps at you. Hey, are you there? I really need to talk to someone about something. You feel like you're getting nowhere with your current task and could probably use a break. However, you know that you have a history of getting distracted and then losing motivation to pick something back up again afterwards. What do you do? Well, he helped me. Why wouldn't I help him? You're feeling like you've hit a brick wall with your task, so why not take a break and help out a friend? Hey, what's up? Oh, good, you're there. I just found out I got cheated on. I don't know what to do. Oh no, that's horrible. The two of you talk for a long time and you lend a shoulder to your friend. You give him a space to rant, to cry, and most importantly, to be able to voice his inner turmoil. You give him your full attention and talk him through what his options are for what he does next. You keep him from doing something rash, and the two of you decide it's best for him to sleep on it before he does anything. Exhausted, he departs for bed and thanks you for being there to talk with him. As you close the I am window, you feel horribly sorry for your friend, but happy that you were able to help. It serves as a tangible reminder that you're capable of being useful to someone instead of solely being a mess that needs everyone else's help. You boot up your work project and find that you're suddenly able to get some solid progress done that night. It's a sunny Saturday afternoon. You're in deep thought on the way home from therapy. However, you notice that this time you're not in the same negative feedback loops you usually get trapped in when being this introspective. You realize that, although you still have your bad days, your lows aren't quite as low as they used to be. Your antidepressant bottle rolls across your dashboard and you take a turn left. You've been on this medication for quite a while now, after a period of trying a few different kinds. Though you still have minor side effects, they've overall become a noticed part of your life. You feel as if your life has generally changed for the better recently, and you begin to wonder if you need them anymore. You don't feel as much despair or hopelessness, and you hate yourself a lot less these days. Maybe it's time to stop taking these, you think. I seem to not really need them anymore. What a stupid fucking way to think before you continue taking your medication. You have the realization that you can't be sure if it's a general life change that's making you feel better, or if it's just a sign that the medication is working. You decide against discontinuing your meds. It's not really a lesson you'd like to learn the hard way, and the side effects of this particular kind are negligible. The next time you see Dr. Melville, you tell her about this. She informs you that this is a common train of thought that people who have begun using medication to help them manage their depression experience, and that you manage to dodge a bullet because it generally ends poorly. She also asks you talk to her first before making any decisions about your medication in the future. It's yet another sleepless Thursday night. You're at Alex's apartment, wide awake in bed as she's sleeping peacefully beside you. She fell asleep hours ago, and you've been laying here unable to shut your brain up long enough to fall asleep. You've added the feelings of insecurity about your relationship to the rest of the noise in your head keeping you up that night. It was kind of a tense night between you two. You arrived after a stressful day at work, and as you made dinner together, you barely said a word. You were stuck in your own head and had a hard time really being present with her as your thoughts turned to all the ways you feel like you're deficient at being a good person and beating yourself up mentally for each one. She told you she could tell when you were in one of your moods and said that she wouldn't push you, but missed talking to you as the two of you sat on the couch together. You wanted to tell her how much you love her, but you couldn't make the words come out right and ended up sounding defensive instead. As you lay there next to her now, you trace your fingers across her arm just slightly enough to not wake her. You still haven't explained your depression to her, or how you started seeing a therapist, or that you've been taking medication and it's starting to feel more and more like a secret you're keeping instead of something she simply doesn't know about yet. Excuse me. It's becoming more and more apparent that it's impacting your relationship with her, and you feel guilty about this. However, you're also terrified that she knew exactly how fucked up you were that she would leave you. You're already worried that she's only with you because she doesn't realize how terrible of a person you are yet, and you're afraid that this would be the final thing to expose you. She stirs in her sleep and squints as she opens her eyes. With the confusion that comes with waking up, she asks if you're awake and if everything's okay. You feel like a jerk for accidentally waking her up, but you're afraid if you put this off any longer, that you won't find the strength to tell her everything later. No, actually, everything isn't okay. Can I tell you something? Something important? Alex sits up, rubbing the sleep out of her eyes. For the rest of the night, you lay side by side, holding hands as you tell her everything. You tell her how it's more than just feeling sad sometimes, how you feel trapped by your own mind sometimes, how sometimes you feel nothing at all, and how you can't shake it off. You tell her how you've started going to therapy and how you feel embarrassed about it and how it's working out for you. She listens the entire time, occasionally asking questions about how this or that works, or asking you to explain something further. She squeezes your hand and tells you she understands and that she's sad you didn't tell her sooner. After laying silent for a moment, the weight of what you did hits you. You desperately want her to say something, to tell you how she's feeling about it all, but you're too afraid of what the answer would be to ask. You start convincing yourself that now that she knows everything, she's going to leave. There's no way someone could deal with how you really are. So how can I help? What do you need me to do? She asks. You think for a second, and the answer you come up with fills you with despair. I honestly don't know. I wish I knew how to fix this, but I don't know that you can do anything. I think it's something I just have to live with. She looks at you with sad eyes before kissing you on the forehead. Then I'll live with it with you. I don't know how you could possibly love me. She rolls over and wraps her arms around my neck, settling her head on top of yours. You don't need to. Just know that I do. It's Friday night and you're laying across your bed feeling pathetic. As you were leaving work tonight, a group of coworkers asked if you wanted to join them for drinks. Feeling antisocially and put on the spot, you declined. You have a habit of doing this. You're often so convinced that you are weird and terrible and that any invitation to hang out will end in disappointment for those inviting you. You never feel like you know how to act in group outings, and you feel like a total creep since it seems to come so naturally to anyone who isn't you. You find yourself petrified of breaking some unknown social rule that you don't often go out. Now, however, you find yourself alone at home. Your brain has begun telling you how pathetic and sad you are for being unable to just be a normal person and go out with nice people. You can't figure out why you can't just go out and meet people and enjoy yourself. At the same time, you're also feeling like no one would possibly want to hang out with you if they really knew you, because you're dull and weird anyway. You try your typical strategy and boot up Netflix to distract yourself from these feelings, but frustration with yourself builds and you realize you have to do something else with your night. Anything else to take your mind off how awful and lonely you are. You dial Alex's phone number, figuring that if you could spend some time with her instead of being cooped up in your apartment alone, you might feel less isolated. Her phone rings a handful of times before going to voicemail. You know it's not uncommon for her to be out with her friends at this hour. You leave a voicemail but end up calling again 15 minutes later. Still no response. You imagine Alex out with her friends, much like you would be tonight if you weren't so horrible at socializing. Your mind wanders and you start to wonder who she's with, and if she might meet someone tonight she'd rather be with. Someone who is able to go to parties like this with her instead of sitting at home feeling sorry for themselves. Why didn't she invite you? Have you just said no one too many times? How many other Fridays have you unknowingly missed? You begin to think that maybe it would be better if she met someone tonight. She's a wonderful woman and you feel like a constant joy kill on nights like this. Why can't you just be normal? The next morning, Alex calls you back. She tells you that she left her phone in class and spent a boring night in her apartment too. You feel horribly embarrassed about how emotional you'd gotten over mistaken assumptions the night before. It's a cold Saturday afternoon. You've just arrived at Alex's apartment and you're happy to finally see her after a week of absence due to your schedules not lining up. due to work and school. You hug her in the doorway and she breaks away sooner than normal and sits down on the couch as you take off your sneakers and lay them in the usual place right next to hers. There's something I was hoping we could talk about actually, she says. You instantly worry that you're being blindsided by a breakup conversation due to the sudden shift in tone, but she quickly smiles and puts you at ease when she sees all of the color leave your face. It's nothing bad, I promise. With that, she leads you over to the couch and sits on the other end facing you. So, I hope this doesn't freak you out, and if you feel like things are going too fast, just tell me. She talks faster than usual and fidgets. We seem to have a lot of weeks like this and they really suck. I was thinking I'd ask, since things are so strong with us, what are your thoughts on maybe moving in together? It takes a few seconds to sink in, and leaves you with a bit of a shock when it does. You were worried she wanted to spend less time with you, not more. Do you want to, you ask? Well, yeah, I do. I mean, we'd have to sort out logistics and everything, but those are all the things we can take care of. You start to walk through the steps of imagining the two of you living together. You love the thought of being able to wake up next to her every day and seeing her so often. However, the more you picture it, the more a few concerns become apparent. There are things she is insulated from, like the days you don't feel like you can even get out of bed, the nights your medication keeps you from being able to sleep, and all those moments you're stuck staring at the wall, completely out of energy and feeling nothing. How would she handle that? How quickly would she want to go get away? So she starts, what do you think? You're really worried that if Alex were to live with you, she wouldn't be able to deal with your days of being unable to get out of bed or nights where you can do nothing but stare at the wall and panic. Even though you've discussed your situation with her, you still fear that she doesn't realize the depths of how bad it gets. It's one thing for you to detail how you feel sometimes, it's another, and for her to see it pop up occasionally. It's an entirely different situation for it to be something she has to live with alongside you. Well, I'd like to, but I think it's best if we talk about it more before committing to a decision. Though she seems a little defeated, you make it clear that you're not making excuses and actually mean you want to talk. You reiterate a lot of what you told Alex that night, and although she gets a little defensive and tells you she knows all of that already, she confirms that she is willing to help you sort through your issues. I feel like you forget I love you sometimes. I know that there will be bad days, and I'd rather try and work through them with you. We can figure out all of this together. Her words sway you, and you can't help but hold her close to you. It's December, and you've returned to your parents' house to celebrate the holidays with your family. Out the living room window, you can see a gentle flurry of snow drifting down to meet the pristine blanket of white from yesterday's unexpected Christmas Eve snowfall, and you quietly laugh to yourself at how incredibly cliché it seems. Still, as you sit down to dinner, you can't help but notice how being surrounded by family and the overly kitschy atmosphere of your mom's decorations have actually made you feel relaxed and almost comfortable. Your mom is running around frantically, checking the oven and the stockings, and just generally trying to family time it up, while your dad sits at the head of the table drinking a beer and laughing with your with your brother Malcolm. His wife Karen is there too, whom you've always gotten along well with. As you thoughtfully munch away at your turkey, you listen to the conversations around you. Your thoughts drift back over the last few months. You think about how hard things have gotten, replaying over in your head some of your worst as well as some of your best memories. It seems like all these things just came to a head over the past few months with a sudden flurry of relationship turmoil and professional anxiety, social stress, and above all, the omnipresent sense of weight that seems to have just recently become aware of. You're drawn out of your reverie by your dad's familiar booming laugh as some cheesy comment Malcolm made seems to have hit its mark. Sitting at the table, you're suddenly immensely glad for the chance to be able to ignore everything for an evening and not have to struggle to trying to explain yourself for once. Fortunately, everyone seems to be content with laughing at each other's jokes and discussing favorite sport teams, and for a while you think that you'll be able to get through dinner without any embarrassing personal intrusions, but no sooner did the thought cross your mind that the table conversation trails off, leaving a slightly awkward silence to descend upon dinner. So how are you doing these days? Your mom asked pointedly. Quote needs to end. It's such a simple question, and one that you seem to have had to answer countless times recently. You take a moment to collect your thoughts, then looking up you take a deep breath. You've never really thought of yourself as a fighter, and even to say it now sounds hokey, but looking back at the past few months to where you are now, it really does feel like you've endured an immense struggle, and you look at where you are now with a sense of something that isn't quite pride. You still hate your job and find it unpleasant, but you're surprised to find that going into work every day is no longer a monumental challenge. You started adopting some clever techniques, like taking short 2-minute breaks every hour to break up the monotony. And you now view your job as just 8 short hours of your day, a compartmentalization technique Dr. Melville told you about that you've found actually works quite well. You know this job isn't what you want to do for the rest of your life, and you started actively looking for other positions, even attending a couple of preliminary interviews. You've started making effort to go out with your friends more. While the social scene still makes you very uncomfortable sometimes, you're more and more able to let yourself just enjoy the company of your friends. In fact, your relationship with many of them has increased over the past little while. You still definitely have days where you flake out and don't feel up to hanging out, but for the most part your friends are understanding and appreciate your communication. By far the biggest change you've noticed in your life has been your relationship with Alex. You were terrified of talking to her about everything at first, but looking back you feel like it's only strengthened your relationship. She was always supportive of you emotionally, but lately the two of you have been even more in sync, and it's really starting to feel like you're building a life together. It even seems like the two of you have been making a more concerted effort to sync up your schedules, and have been spending more and more of your downtime with each other. Pretty soon, you think moving in together may be a very real possibility. Dr. Melville has commented on how well you seem to be doing, and whether a result of the therapy, the medication, or both, you can't help but agree. With all that seems to have improved recently, it's sometimes difficult for you to think about the fact that you still have bad days, sometimes even really bad days. They serve as a stark reminder of the fact that this will be something you likely have to deal with for the rest of your life. Depression is a battle, and though you're certainly ahead in the fight, you know the battle isn't ever going to be over. Sometimes even Alex can tell when things are going rough, despite your best efforts to the contrary. While you know that your depression can never be cured, you have a very strong support network in your friends and even Malcolm, and are with a newfound confidence in your friends and family. You accept that though the road may be rocky, it is at very least not solitary. You meet your mom's gaze, and across the table you muster up a smile. "I'm good, Mom," you tell her. She says nothing, but you can feel her smile from across the table. I guess that's it. I can tell you from personal experience that is very accurate.